Welcome to the Bigger Cash Flow podcast, where we interview business owners and real estate investors that share tips and tricks on how to grow your cash flow and reach financial freedom.
What's up, everyone? Today on the show, we have Tyler Jahnke, based out of San Francisco, California. During the day, he oversees ticket sales for large-scale sporting events. He has been investing in real estate for about 2 years and has invested in over 83 units across the Midwest. He is the founder of JumpInRealEstate, where he documents his real estate journey step by step and how you too can create passive cash flow through real estate investing. Welcome to the show, Tyler.
Hello, Joe. Hello, Bo. Glad we could chat tonight.
I know you and I got connected a little under a year ago, and I've been kind of following your journey through your blog and your Instagram, and you provide a tremendous value for the newbie investor who's looking to get in. If you can share with our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you're currently doing to create cash flow.
Yeah, Bo. So like you said, we met about a year ago, and I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I went to school down south in Riverside, kind of we'll call it the desert of LA. Moved home after college and had no clue what to do. I jumped into different little areas of my life in terms of hobbies, one of them being sports. And that kind of took me onto a little ride of being in college athletics. And I now, like you said, oversee ticket sales for a number of sporting events globally and throughout the U.S. I'm now investing in real estate in the Midwest, multiple units in Indianapolis, and also a syndication in Louisville right now.
Wow, that was a lot. So
Sorry,
tell us how.
quick.
Yeah. Tell us how you got from zero to where you are right now, and what's the origin story? What kind of even sparked your interest in saying, hey, I want to invest in real estate? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking back, and it's funny, I had a conversation with one of my friends this morning about the origin story, and flashing back to 2016, a couple of years ago, we'll call it, I was making about $40,000 in one of the highest cost of living regions of the world. We'll call it the Bay Area here. And I knew that I had to make some changes in my life in terms of increasing income. I was pretty comfortable where I was in my current position, but I wasn't taking home a lot of money in terms of adding to my savings. I was a good saver, but I knew I had to make some changes. I didn't want to work in this we'll call it the rat race for 50 plus years, and I knew I didn't want to save my way to retirement. And so that's where kind of the spark started. That's where the jump in mentality started. And the first step for me was education. I hopped on a bunch of podcasts and I read a lot of books, mainly surrounding entrepreneurship and building businesses, because you look at the numbers and a lot of the wealthy people in this world, they've started businesses and they've grown their income through entrepreneurship. And so that's really what started things. I mean, again, podcasts were a huge driver. And through that, I listened to a lot of, I guess one of my favorite podcasts is called EO Fire with John Lee Dumas. And he just, for years, he would just interview entrepreneurs daily. And so I just popped that in every morning on my way to work or at the gym and listened to these successful business owners and business builders and just take away and soak up their knowledge in terms of what they're doing from a business standpoint. And I noticed there was a theme. A lot of them talked about real estate. Maybe it was a little not hobby, but kind of a side income stream. And that got me really thinking about the power of real estate. And the tangible side of that as well is, every month I'd be sitting on my bed writing my rent check and, making $40,000 a year. I was spending $1,300 a month sharing a bedroom in the Bay Area. And that was a big chunk of my income. And I was like, man, I gotta get on the other side of that check. I need to stop writing my checks to the landlord, and I gotta become the landlord. So that was really kind of what started things for me.
Let's get into that first deal, or the first, you said you started looking at Indianapolis. What got you going into that market? Was there somebody that introduced you to it?
Yeah, I would say I somewhat fell into that market. At that early stage, we'll go back to October of 2016. this is when I'm in that stage of, okay, I need to find ways to increase my income. I'm all aboard on the real estate train here. And so I found out about the quote unquote, we'll call it the turnkey model, which, that should mean rather straightforward investment. You buy a property, collect rent, and you keep the cash flow. And in 5 to 6 to 10 properties, you're living free. You're financially free, we'll call it. So that was the thought going into it. And the turnkey model got me hooked on the Indianapolis market kind of by default. Like I said, I wasn't necessarily searching for Indianapolis to be my market, but I did fall into that market through that experience of working with the turnkey provider for that first investment. I did finally see the great signs of a positive city. So there's a number of metrics out there that, the basics of population growth, job growth, higher wages going into town, universities close by, and then just the basic metrics of price to rent ratios. You can still beat the quote unquote 1% rule out there. So those are some of the basic metrics there. But to answer your question, Joe, the reason why I got in Indianapolis was because of the turnkey provider and the turnkey model that I was attracted to early on.
Now looking back, because now that you have a little bit more experience, can you evaluate that turnkey model? Is that something that you would continue to do? Is that something you would recommend to new investors?
So this is the answer to that question is I will no longer go the turnkey route. However, without me going that turnkey route initially, I may not have ever been in real estate. And so, I think that's a tough answer for me to give you because I see the value of turnkey in that it got me started and it got me to jump into real estate, like my brand. But and so it got the ball rolling for me. It created a less of a barrier of entry to get into real estate. I think especially being out of state, you worry about, okay, you kind of have the emotional worries of my house is 2,000 miles away. There's a renter out there. I don't even know how to do construction. And so the model of turnkey is very appealing, I'll say that. And again, it got me to start and jump into real estate. Now looking back, because I've built the connections on the ground in Indianapolis specifically, I know that I can get a quote unquote better deal because a turnkey product is essentially, you're almost buying at retail. You're buying we'll call it a brand new quote unquote rehab unit that there's no value add opportunity there.
Right.
You're buying at its peak acquisition price. And so, the numbers still may make sense on paper. But I think right now, in terms of my experience, I can find better deals.
I feel exactly the same way. I started with turnkey. And in fact, I think, Bo, didn't you also start in turnkey as well as your first deal?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Tyler's saying. I mean, although I'm no longer doing the turnkey model and I'm doing my own rehabs, I think if I hadn't started with turnkey, I would have never started because investing in a market that's 2,000 miles away that I have never been to before and I don't know the local nuances of that market, having a local boots on the ground helped me overcome some of that fear. And, speaking of which, I actually was on a call with a listener today, and he's also from the Bay Area, a little bit north in the Sacramento area, and he's looking to invest in Indianapolis. So funny coincidence. But, we were just talking for 30 minutes and how he still has that mental block in terms of, hey, I don't know if out-of-state investing is right for me. So Tyler, can you kind of speak to how it looks like instead of going the top down of looking at the markets and then looking at the providers, you kind of pinpointed the provider you wanted to work with and then started feeling out the market. Once you identified that provider, can you kind of speak to our listeners about some of the due diligence steps that you took in terms of underwriting the property? If you didn't know how to underwrite it, how did you do the research?
Yeah, and that leads to the biggest mistake / learning lesson of my real estate career. I was very naive going into the real estate industry. I was, thankful that I was able to really pull the trigger on this first property pretty quickly. I didn't fall into that analysis paralysis phase. And so kind of back to my earlier answer of the benefits and the pros and cons of a turnkey, I'm going to give you a similar answer where, I went full steam into real estate rather naive, and I didn't looking back at that first property, I didn't properly know how to even evaluate the numbers. And I didn't properly vet my property manager or the turnkey provider. And at the end of the day, that created a lot of challenges for me as an investor. The first year went rather smooth, we'll call it. I was getting decent cash flow every month. Little did I know that, no communication from the property manager and just getting rent checks might sound great on paper, but that also means your property manager is not checking up on your property at all. So I didn't properly vet my property manager or the turnkey company, and that was a huge challenge towards the end of that particular investment, which I later had sold, I guess, late last year. I didn't have the ability or the real knowledge to run the numbers properly, and I didn't properly vet my property managers, which again, like I said, I've now learned from that biggest mistake.
What were some red flags, if any, that could have been like, oh, this doesn't sound right? Is there anything that, looking back, were some big red flags?
Yeah, first red flag for me was lack of communication and delayed communication. And I kind of got sucked into this dream of real estate would be my path out of the 9-to-5 job, and I definitely fell into, like I said, that dream of at the end of the day acquiring, we'll call it 10 properties that are going to be cash flowing a good chunk of money and that are going to cover my expenses, and I could quit my job, we'll call it. But red flags, lack of communication. We'd go days upon days, even weeks, without an email response. And so in my book, I probably should have been more proactive in identifying that and trying to nip that in the butt and understand that this was going to be a big issue. Because when you're talking about construction timelines and rental timelines and getting the property on the market, as an out-of-state investor, especially being a new investor and still having those fears of, is this going to actually work out for me? The lack of communication was the biggest red flag up front. And like I said, I kind of ignored that, or I did ignore that because I fell in love with this dream of passive income.
And that's really interesting because I think a lot of us who have W-2 incomes look at real estate that way initially as a passive opportunity, but passive should be in quotes because you really need to be actively managing your passive portfolio, meaning you need to check in with your managers. Mm-hmm. I have a quick story about not getting rent checks for 2 months. Mm-hmm. And finding out later that the property management company went bankrupt, right? And so I never saw. Nobody told me. No communication, nothing. Actually, I think the company acted like they weren't bankrupt, and in fact, they try to collect more rent from the tenant, even after I found out they went bankrupt. Mm-hmm. So the tenant calls me and says, "Oh, they called me again to send them the rent check instead of to you directly." So I think those kind of pitfalls we face a lot when you're not, actively checking in, monitoring your portfolio, your property management. And I think that communication is key. But even with good communication, you could still get screwed. So yeah, if you're not getting communication, that's a huge, huge red flag for sure.
Well, that kind of leads in perfectly to me wanting to thank you, Bo, publicly for being somewhat of the savior of that property. I remember. So back to my first property, the thing performed for about 11 straight months. I was cash flowing for 11 straight months. Again, very rarely was my property manager checking in with me. And I was like, this is the greatest investment. This is amazing. I'm bringing in $750 a month and I paid, less than $45K. And I remember getting a message from this guy named Bo Kim one day on Bigger Pockets, and he was like, "Hey Tyler, I think your property is vacant." And I'm like, "What? Who's this Bo Kim guy? And what is he doing by my property?" And
he's stalking you.
Is he just trying to mess with me right now? And so, but again, Bo, I want to thank you for kind of identifying that. And you were out there in Indianapolis, and you without me telling you to do it, just checked on my property and provided some huge value there. And at that point, I got a third-party property manager out there just to double-check everything. And sure enough, about a year into my investment, without any knowledge, my front door had a lockbox in the front. And I was, that's where kind of the challenges really hit me hard. And luckily, I was able to kind of push through that and get through it in a somewhat efficient manner, but that was definitely one of the biggest challenges to kind of get over.
Yeah, and it's really funny because that's how we got connected, and we've had some meaningful conversations after. But it was my first trip to Indianapolis, and it was funny because I was meeting other investors and property managers, and they already knew who you were, actually. So I was following your Bigger Pockets post because I myself was actually looking at that provider, and I was trying to vet him out and see other people's experience. I was like, hey, I think his property is probably like 10 minutes away. Might as well go check. And lo and behold, it's vacant. So glad we were able to kind of find that and, help you move forward.
Like I said, the greatest and worst investment all in one. Best learning moments, worst investment.
Yeah. I think my first property, when I look at my entire portfolio as well, it's the worst performer. And I'm actually glad, I'm pretty sure you feel the same way, Tyler, is that I'm glad I tripped up on my first one so that my second, third, and fourth, I already know what's the issue instead of, kind of tripping on my fifth one and 1 to 5 is already all messed up. So, I see it as a blessing in disguise, but it still hurts, right?
I mean, well, like you said, 100% agree with you there. At the time, it was rather miserable. It sucked. Like, again, it squashes that dream when you're going through those types of challenges. But looking past that, my second investment, my third investment, even my latest investment in an apartment complex, you learn so much through that first property. And for me, it was essentially, don't just buy a property because the numbers look great on paper. Like I said, this property was under $45K, easily beat the 1% rule. On paper, it was an amazing investment, but there's a lot more in investing in real estate than just the numbers on paper. It's neighborhood location, it's tenant class that you're drawing in. That's another part of it. And so it's also working with the right people and people you trust and actually have a relationship with. I mean, since that moment, I've flown out to Indianapolis again, and I've now, personally met my property managers. I've personally met my agents. I've personally met, everyone on the ground right now. I've shaken their hands. I've taken them to dinner. Like, you got to build those relationships. And that's what I was lacking with my first property. I just kind of, flew in there and said hi and took the easy way out of it by just trusting this one person to run the investment. And that was a big mistake on my part. But like you said, Bo, that's the biggest learning moment right there is that first investment.
So again, Tyler, that totally speaks to you being passive when you fly out there, meet all those people, right? That's the reality of it. If you're going to do this thing well, you just can't sit on your butt and just assume everything's going to go well. Then it'll all just crash down on you. So I'm definitely realizing those same lessons. Can you tell us a little bit more about, like, in detail, how you finance that first deal and what kind of financing you're looking at in future deals?
So my story of financing that first deal is going to be quick. I paid all cash, and it was a big chunk of my savings. And again, looking back at it, man, I think I was rather naive in some areas of my life there. It was quite a risk when you look at, depleting a good chunk of your cash right there. And in my mind, it was, I think buying all cash and the fact that I was avoiding a mortgage for some reason created more comfort in my life. I was like, okay, if it's vacant for a month or two, I don't have to worry about a payment here and there. And so that was my reasoning early on for paying all cash. But now I have decided to use leverage. And so my latest single family, my duplex, they're both leveraged through just a regular lender, actually someone that Joe uses as well, and I think had it on an earlier podcast, Sean Huss, 30-year fixed mortgage, between 5 and 5.25% on my mortgages right now. And, at a certain point now, you become somewhat cash poor in my circumstances, with most of my money being in real estate. So now I'm looking at other opportunities. How do I finance the next deal? And that's going to either be through partnerships, and I do believe in partnerships now. I think early on I was very much into the solo mentality of just doing things on my own and figuring it out on my own. But now I do see the value of partnerships, and also not only just the fact that you can split responsibilities, but pooling cash together, similar to like a syndication, you can really scale much larger there.
Just for our listeners who are newer to real estate investing, there's really a lot of good nuggets. One of the things that I'm hearing is if you want to go fast, then you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you got to go with a team, right? And I think the more experience that I get as well, I'm learning that it's a team sport in some of these aspects where, you're partnering up with the right contractors, your right realtors and brokers and property managers to make sure that you have a stable cash flowing portfolio and you're able to kind of scale it up safely and securely. And I like what you kind of shared with us, your entire story kind of to date is it seems like you're able to kind of take a lot of action without that analysis paralysis, which I see in a ton of new investors is they reach out to me, they ask me, hey, Bo, how did you get started? How did you, grow your portfolio? And then 3 months later, 5 months later, they come back to me and they're at that same spot, right? They haven't taken that massive action like you did. And it reminds me of one of the podcasts I love listening to, and it's Matt Terrio, Epic Real Estate. And he says this all the time. You go as far as the eye can see, and once you get there, you'll be able to see further, right? So once you take action and you get from A to B, then the potential that you have expands, and you're able to get to C, to D, to E, to the next level. So it seems like that's what you're doing, Tyler, and it's just great being able to follow your journey.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bo. And I think to just echo what you just said, I was at a conference this past weekend and I was talking to a lot of people just randomly. I showed up there, didn't really know too many people there, and got talking to some people, prior to the sessions. And, there's a lot of highly motivated people there, a lot of people that really want to learn about the real estate industry. But I'll be honest with you, the first couple of people I met, they talked about, how they're learning about real estate. They're reading all these books, they're listening to these podcasts, they're going to all these conferences, they're meeting all these people. And I asked them, not in a judgmental way, but like, how many units do you have? How many properties have you invested? Just in a curiosity type of question. And a lot of them are at, they're at zero. And so, I think analysis paralysis is definitely a real thing. And luckily I was able to kind of fight through that phase, again, rather naively and not knowing how to run the basic numbers and how to vet a property manager and how to build that relationship on the ground. Luckily, it's turned out positive for me, but I think what pushes me to take that action, well, number one, you have to have risk tolerance, be willing to take that risk. And really, I think for me, it's seeing the long-term vision. And I know that without taking some of these risks, maybe I'm more comfortable in life in terms of, yes, I work the 9 to 5 for the next 45 years and I live off my 401k and, well, I was going to say Social Security, but probably not for us, Bo.
Hey, not for me either, man. I'm not that old.
You too, so, yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to I have a vision for my life that is going to have a pretty financially healthy, I guess, state. But I also know that I'm not going to achieve that if I just kind of work the quote unquote 9 to 5. And so that's going to require me to take risks and go against the curve and really kind of veer off from what the normal person, quote unquote, does day in, day out. And so that's where I'm able to find that, I wouldn't say courage, but just the want to take that risk and challenge myself.
Yeah, no, I love it. A lot of people who have gone through what you did with the first property, they would have been just so turned off by the whole experience that they may have just told themselves, hey, real estate investing isn't for me. Or, they, even worse, they may have had a partner or a spouse tell them, see, I told you so, right? Don't invest in real estate. So how did you, pick yourself back up and go for deal number 2?
Yeah, and this might be somewhat of a cop-out answer, but by the time I found out that my first property was struggling immensely, in that it was vacant and had a squatter in the garage and required $16,000 in repairs, by the time I found that out, I already had my second property under contract. And so,
You're committed.
now here's what I'll say. Regardless, I think I would have still gone down the real estate path because I like to think that I do have that grit, and I want to see something. I want to, real estate is a big choice that I made in my life, and I don't think after one property in 1 year of owning something can dictate the rest of my real estate career. And so, like I said, I had a second property under contract. I had already learned from my previous mistakes. I bought in a better neighborhood. I bought a house that rented for $1,000 a month, not $750. I bought in a better school district. So I had already kind of checked off some of the boxes there in what did I learn from this previous property, and how can I apply that to the next. And so I really saw that I could still make this real estate thing work. I now know how to run the numbers properly, like the basic stuff like that. And so, yes, going through those initial challenges, it really sucked at the time. But I also, I didn't think that this would be my one and only property. Like I said, I had a vision for where I wanted my portfolio to be. And I also knew that one blip in the radar wouldn't affect the rest of my career.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I love that story of how you kind of learned from the past and learned from your first deal, or actually took massive action such that you were already in your second deal and you learned for the third deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real story behind success, because you have the massive action component, but then if you don't have that resilience and patience and growth to pivot and change, you can't really succeed in this business and this investing, or in life in general, right? So I think these are like life skills that you just apply to everything that you do. So that's fantastic. And so can you take us to that next step? Because now I'm really excited, because I think all of us investors dream about that multifamily syndication.
Yeah, this is another case of me going after this new type of asset and strategy, still somewhat naive. I'm definitely no master multifamily investor, but I do see the value and power of a large-scale multifamily. And so it came down to, I think, for me, the basic strategy of this type of investment. So I'll give you the details of this investment. It's an 80-unit property in Louisville, Kentucky, and it still is a rather large-scale value-add property, meaning the occupancy was only at 50% when we acquired it. So again, 40 of the units were vacant. And so I wouldn't say it was a distressed property physically, but from a management standpoint, yes, it could definitely use some work on the management side, as well as some renovation upside as well. So it's essentially kind of what Bo's doing on his single families. We'll call it a big burr for now. We'll call it a big burr. So you're finding a distressed property, adding value to it, raising rents. And the cool thing about large scale multifamily is, a lot of the property value is based off of NOI or net operating income. And so if you can force appreciation and raise rents on your units, not only are you bringing in more cash flow, you're also you're literally raising the value of the property. So that was just so appealing to me, as well as the fact that I would be pretty much literally a limited partner in that my investment would be very passive. It comes down to trusting the syndicators running the deal. And so there's pros and cons, obviously, to having no control, right? So I literally have no control, which also means I have no responsibility in a way. So that there's pros and cons there. But to me, the model and the strategy of taking a large asset, pooling investors' money together to acquire the property, pooling money to put in a renovation budget, raising rents on 80 units, which increases cash flow and also property value. That, to me, that's just a brilliant strategy.
So on the multifamily side, that's kind of one of my goals for 2019 as well, is that I wanted to be a limited partner on a syndication. And one of the benefits that I saw was the possibility of me kind of seeing how the sausage is being made in terms of what are some of the highlights that the syndicator, the GP, is looking for, how they prepare the communication, the financials. Do you find yourself being able to kind of learn through over the shoulder?
Yeah, and that was actually one of the questions I got asked by some of my friends were, okay, so you're going to be, cool, Tyler, you're investing in this 80-unit apartment complex, but you're completely passive and you have no involvement in it at all. And that is true to an extent, but in my eyes, it was an opportunity not only to just run through the basic financials of the deal. I mean, again, the syndicators put together and they underwrite the property, and they send you a lot of documents that run through just, again, the projections, the financials, where does it currently stand right now? How much money do we need for the rehab? Like, so in my eyes, running through just those documents and looking at how these syndicators are putting deals together, that was gained knowledge right there in my book. Now I can talk to other people that have invested in multifamily and talk to them about, acquisition costs or management fees or, preferred returns. Like these were terms I didn't know 6 months ago, but now I can actually speak the lingo. And so again, I am very passive, but you do pick up little nuggets of knowledge here and there, and I can speak to syndicators and other limited partners with the same type of knowledge that I didn't have this, like I said, 6 months ago. So anything I've learned through this property has been huge in my investing career. And, I think that's been kind of the biggest takeaways from this deal, even being a limited partner.
Yeah, learn by doing. I love it.
Yeah.
So, we talked about your single family investing and your limited partnership on the syndication side, but there is this other side of Tyler that we definitely want to cover today, and that's your Jump In Real Estate blog, your social media following, and all this other great stuff that you're kind of laying it all out there for your followers to see and follow and make sure that they don't make the same mistakes that you make, right? So can you kind of speak to us about that and, what are some of your goals for 2019 and beyond?
Yeah, so I would say, we talked about this a little earlier before the show started, Joe and Bo, but what really got me thinking about creating somewhat of an online presence was, we'll rewind back to my, I basically posted on the Bigger Pockets website a somewhat detailed journal and story of my first investment. And I definitely saw that there were readers and a lot of engagement there. And I kind of gathered and garnered an audience there. And so in my mind, that was an opportunity to kind of create my own platform and also just really literally go down to the details of the numbers and videos and what my thought was and my process of, getting in the real estate world. And so I built out this blog, JumpInRealEstate.com, where I do detail all of my deals online. I do have detailed monthly income reports as well. And so the thought is to, again, create value for the readers, hopefully help people jump into the real estate world. We talked about how there's that analysis paralysis phase, and I try and create less barriers for these newer investors, because I do see the value in real estate investing, and I do see that there is, like we said, there's a challenge and a barrier of entry, and the kind of a mindset needed to pull the trigger on a property. It's definitely, real estate is somewhat of a risk and can be a challenge for most people to try and pull the trigger on, and so 2019 for me is hopefully increasing my portfolio through additional assets or syndications, and also creating more content on my website to really just help people invest in real estate. Really, that's the goal of it. And I really want to make sure that I detail the truth. The thought is hopefully that people read this and they see it and they are better prepared for their future in real estate.
Yeah, and I love your transparency, both during this conversation and also on your website, because I think that's what people are really looking for. They want an honest look at investing in real estate, and it's too easy. Like if you go on Facebook, it's too easy. 99% of posts are wins, right? All the wins that you've had both in your investing life or your personal life, your ski trips, and it just makes it look like everyone is on vacation all the time, right? But that is definitely not the reality, right? So I really love that about your site and your blog, and I think that's what is attracting a lot of people to come and learn from you.
Tyler, I know you had a monthly post where like a tree fell on your roof. And then
I was just going to mention that.
And then a tree fell on my duplex, and Tyler and I, we were texting each other. It's like, hey, I got one too. So.
Oh, man.
I mean, yeah, back to the transparency thing. I mean, I've been in real estate for 2 years, we'll call it. It's not always been easy. It's not always been smooth. Things are gonna pop up in real estate. Like you mentioned, Bo. New Year's Day rolls around. It's 2019, right? Everyone's like, New Year, new me. And the first email I get in 2019 is from my property manager. Sends me a photo, and there is a tree limb literally stuck in my roof. It's sticking out of the roof, and my gutter's all busted. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, welcome to 2019. And so, I ended up with about a $900 repair expense there. And so let's just say that cut into cash flow a little bit. But, yeah, so it's about transparency. It's telling it how it is and fighting through those challenges and seeing the long-term vision and the long-term goal of real estate.
Yeah, and actually, you also highlight a really nice part of investing, insurance, right? So that was probably.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. So I did. It was under my deductible.
Right.
So I couldn't take advantage of it.
Oh,
but
okay.
to your point,
Yeah.
yes, you need to have. I think I definitely talked to Bo, I think, very briefly about this whole tree situation, because I know that you had one fall on your house too. But yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't take advantage of it because it was under my deductible. But you do bring up a good point there, Joe, that insurance is very important.
Right.
So, where can our listeners go to find more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so my primary site is JumpInRealEstate.com. I've got links there to all my social handles, and that's probably the best way to find me, through JumpInRealEstate.com.
I would definitely recommend that you reach out to Tyler, and he'll be able to kind of hopefully answer some of your questions. So that wraps up our show for today. If you thought that was helpful, please do us a huge favor and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you right back here next week for another exciting episode of the Bigger Cash Flow Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Bigger Cash Flow Podcast. Please remember that opinions of the guests are their own, and nothing on this show should be considered personal or professional advice. Please consult your tax, legal, or financial advisor for personal advice that fit your unique situation. See you next time.